There was a man on my street who drove a car so old that the paint had faded into 3 different colors. One door didn't quite match the others. The air conditioner barely worked. And every few months, someone would joke that he should finally buy himself a real car. Everyone thought they knew what that meant. He wasn't doing well. Then one Monday morning, at the age of 41, that man walked into work and handed in his resignation. Not because he'd found another job, not because he'd sold a business, and not because he'd inherited money. He was retiring. The people who thought he was broke had been watching his car. They just hadn't been watching his money. And what he did for the next 20 years may completely change the way you think about looking rich. Let's call him Mr. Carter. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a tech founder. He didn't have a 6-figure salary or some secret business running behind the scenes. He had a normal job, a normal paycheck, and, from the outside, a very normal life. His neighbors upgraded their cars every few years. Carter kept the same one. People renovated their kitchens. Carter's looked almost exactly like it had in 1998. Someone would buy a new television, and 6 months later Carter would still be watching the old one. People noticed, and people talked. He's probably struggling. He should really get a better car. Maybe things aren't going so well for him. Carter never corrected them. That was the strange part. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to prove them wrong. He simply smiled and went on with his life. Because every payday, while everyone else was deciding what they could afford to buy, Carter was deciding how much of his paycheck he could afford not to spend. The money moved almost automatically. Some went toward his living expenses. Some stayed in cash for emergencies. And a fixed amount went into long-term investments. Month after month, year after year, he wasn't trying to find the next hot stock. He wasn't checking financial news every 15 minutes. He wasn't gambling on some miracle investment. He was buying diversified assets, staying invested, and letting time do the work. And then he did something that sounds almost painfully boring. He repeated it for years. But here's what makes this story interesting. Carter wasn't trying to become the richest man on the street. He was trying to become the man who needed the least from it. And eventually, that difference became enormous. Because while other people were increasing their lifestyles every time their income increased, Carter kept increasing his freedom. I remember someone asking him about the car one afternoon. It had just come back from another repair. The hood was scratched. The paint was faded. And someone laughed and said, "Come on, Carter. You can afford something better than this." Carter looked at the car. Then he smiled and said something I've never forgotten. "It still gets me where I need to go." That was it. No speech. No explanation. But a few months later, I understood what he meant. Carter wasn't against nice things. He simply refused to let other people's expectations decide what he did with his money. He had figured out something most people learn far too late. Every dollar you spend to impress someone is a dollar that can't buy your freedom later. Now, obviously, an old car by itself doesn't make someone wealthy. And saving money under a mattress doesn't create financial independence either. Carter's advantage was the combination. He kept his lifestyle manageable. He avoided unnecessary consumer debt. He built an emergency cushion. And he consistently invested the difference. Then something powerful happened. His income didn't need to become extraordinary. His time became extraordinary. Because investments don't care whether you're driving a 10-year-old car. They don't care whether your kitchen is fashionable. They don't care what your neighbors think. They only care about what you put in, how long you leave it there, and what happens when those returns begin generating returns of their own. That's compounding. And compounding is almost invisible in the beginning. For years, it can look like nothing is happening. Then one day, you realize the money has started doing some of the work for you. Meanwhile, some of the people who looked far wealthier were living a completely different story. The new car had a payment. The renovated kitchen had financing. The expensive vacation went on to a credit card. The bigger house came with a bigger mortgage. And every raise created another reason to spend. There was nothing inherently wrong with any of those things. The problem was when the lifestyle grew faster than the wealth. Because there's a dangerous illusion in modern life. If you can make the payment, you can afford it. But those are not the same thing. A person can afford the monthly payment and still be moving backward financially. Carter understood that. He wasn't trying to own less forever. He was trying to make sure his money was building something before his lifestyle consumed it. And then came the morning nobody expected. Carter walked into work and quit at 41. No dramatic announcement. No celebration. Just a quiet resignation. People were stunned. One coworker apparently asked him, "What are you going to do?" Carter's answer was simple: whatever I want. And that's when the old car finally made sense. That car wasn't proof that Carter couldn't afford a better life. It was proof that he had stopped needing to look like he could. For 20 years, he had been making a trade almost nobody could see. He traded upgrades for options. He traded status for flexibility. He traded instant gratification for future freedom. And eventually, he reached the point where a paycheck was no longer the thing controlling his life. That's what financial independence really changes. It doesn't necessarily make you rich looking. It makes you harder to control. You can leave a terrible job. You can take time off. You can handle an emergency without your entire life collapsing. You can say no. And sometimes, the greatest luxury money can buy isn't a bigger house, or a newer car, or a more expensive watch. It's the ability to say, I don't have to. That's why the real lesson of Carter's story isn't drive an old car. It's not never enjoy your money. And it's certainly not being cheap makes you wealthy. The lesson is much simpler. Spend intentionally. Enjoy what genuinely matters to you. But don't spend your future trying to impress people who won't be there when the bill arrives. Because wealth and the appearance of wealth are two completely different things. The appearance of wealth is what people can see. Wealth itself is what you don't have to show. It's the emergency fund nobody knows about. The investments nobody sees. The debt you never took on. The expenses you quietly refused. The years you stayed consistent when nobody was applauding. That's the boring part. But the boring part is often where the freedom is built. So maybe that old car isn't embarrassing. Maybe the outdated kitchen isn't a failure. Maybe you don't need the newest phone, the biggest house, or the lifestyle that looks impressive from the outside. Because there's a question worth asking before every major purchase. Am I buying this because I truly want it? Or because I want someone else to think I have it? Those are two very different reasons to spend money. And they lead to two very different lives. Mr. Carter spent 20 years looking ordinary. So that one morning, at 41, he could do something extraordinary. He could walk away. The richest person on the street isn't necessarily the one with the nicest car. Sometimes, it's the person who doesn't need anyone to notice. So build quietly. Invest consistently. Keep your lifestyle under control. And let your money become something far more valuable than a status symbol. Let it become freedom. Because the goal was never to look rich. The goal was to become so financially secure that you no longer cared who thought you were. If this story changed the way you think about wealth, subscribe. Because every week, we explore the psychology, habits, and decisions that help ordinary people build extraordinary financial freedom. And ask yourself one question before you spend your next dollar. Are you buying something? Or are you buying the appearance of something? I'll see you in the next one.